On June 4, 1942, Japanese Admiral Nagumo stood on his ship, thinking Japan was winning. But then a message came. American ships were nearby. In 6 minutes, 4 Japanese carriers burned and sank. Thousands of men died. Nagumo asked one question: how did they know? The war had turned. Japan lost everything in 6 minutes. This is the story of that day. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. It was 1942. The year was still young. The war had started only a few months before. But already, Japan was winning everywhere in the world. In December 1941, Japanese planes had attacked an American military base called Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The attack was very successful. Many American ships sank into the ocean. Many American soldiers died. America was very shocked. America did not know what to do after this attack. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japanese ships and planes went everywhere in the Pacific Ocean. They attacked the Philippines. They attacked Malaysia. They attacked Singapore. They attacked Indonesia. They attacked many islands across the big ocean. They attacked every place they wanted to attack. Japan won every single battle that they fought. American ships were sinking every day. American soldiers were running away and dying. American planes were falling from the sky. It looked like Japan could not lose. It looked like Japan would win the entire war. The most important man who was leading the Japanese Navy was Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. Yamamoto was very smart. Yamamoto was very educated. Yamamoto was very careful about everything. But Yamamoto had one big dream. His dream was to destroy all the American ships. His dream was to make the Pacific Ocean completely Japanese. His dream was to make sure that America could not fight back against Japan anymore. Yamamoto believed that if Japan could destroy all the big American carrier ships, then America would have to give up. America would have to surrender. America would have to accept that Japan was the strongest country. America would have to accept that Japan had won the war. So Yamamoto made a big plan. This plan was called the Battle of Midway. The plan was to attack a small American island called Midway. Yamamoto sent 4 of Japan's biggest and best carrier ships to attack this island. These 4 ships were called the Akagi, the Kaga, the Soryu, and the Hiryu. These 4 ships had attacked Pearl Harbor. These 4 ships had won every battle. These 4 ships were the most powerful ships in the whole Japanese Navy. These 4 ships had sunk American ships and killed American soldiers everywhere they went. Yamamoto thought that when these 4 ships attacked Midway, the American carriers would come to fight them. When the American carriers came, Yamamoto would destroy them. And then America would have no ships left. And then Japan would win the war. It was a good plan. It was a smart plan. At least, it looked like a smart plan at that time. The leader of these 4 Japanese ships was Vice Admiral Tochi Nagumo. Nagumo was not like Yamamoto. Yamamoto was bold and daring. But Nagumo was careful and slow. Nagumo did not like to take big risks. Nagumo liked to follow the rules. Nagumo liked to do things the right way. But Nagumo was very good at his job. Nagumo had attacked Pearl Harbor successfully. Nagumo had won every battle since then. Nagumo knew how to command big ships. Nagumo knew how to control a battle. On June 4, 1942, Nagumo was standing on the bridge of his ship, the Akagi. The bridge is the place where the captain controls the ship. From the bridge, you can see everything. You can see the ocean. You can see the other ships. You can see the sky. That morning, Nagumo was happy. He thought everything was going perfectly. He thought Japan would win this battle easily. He thought there would be no problems. Japanese planes had already attacked the American island of Midway. The planes had bombed the island. The planes had destroyed American buildings and American guns. The planes had come back to the ship safely. Nagumo thought everything was perfect. But then, at 7:28 in the morning, a radio man came running to the bridge. The radio man was excited. The radio man had a message. The message was very important. The radio man gave the message to Nagumo. Nagumo read it carefully. He read it 2 times. He read it 3 times. The message said, 10 ships apparently enemy sighted bearing 0-10 degrees distance 240 miles from Midway course 150 degrees speed over 20 knots. This message meant that American ships were nearby. Not very far away. Nearby. Close to where the Japanese ships were. Nagumo's face did not move. Nagumo did not look shocked. Nagumo did not look angry. Nagumo just looked empty. Like his mind had stopped working. Like his brain had turned off. Like he was thinking about something very far away. Nagumo looked at the message one more time. Then he looked up at his officers. His officers were waiting to hear what he would say. Nagumo spoke very quietly. He said, 10 ships. Enemy ships. 10 ships approaching from the north. One of the officers came closer. The officer wanted to know what Nagumo would do. The officer wanted to know if Nagumo was worried. But Nagumo did not answer the officer. Instead, Nagumo asked a question. Nagumo asked, where are their carriers? Do we know if they have carrier ships? No one knew the answer. The Japanese plane that had sent the message did not say what kind of ships the American ships were. Maybe they were small ships. Maybe they were big ships. Nobody knew. Nagumo thought about this question for a moment. Then he made a decision. He said to the radio operator, send a message to the scout plane. Tell them to find out what kind of ships they are. Tell them to stay with the ships. Tell them to report back as soon as they know what kind of ships they are. So the Japanese sent a message back to the scout plane. The message said, ascertain ship types and maintain contact. Then Nagumo waited. The officers waited. Everyone waited to see what the next message would say. At 7:45 in the morning, another message came from the scout plane. This message was different from the first message. The message said, enemy is composed of 5 cruisers and 5 destroyers. When Nagumo heard this news, his face changed. The empty look disappeared. A small smile came on his face. Relief came over his whole body. Why was Nagumo happy? Because cruisers and destroyers are small ships. They are not the big important ships. The big important ships are called carriers. Carriers have planes on them. Carriers can attack from far away. Carriers are very dangerous. But cruisers and destroyers are different. They are smaller. They are easier to attack. Japan could kill them easily. Nagumo thought that America had sent only small ships to protect Midway. Nagumo thought that the American carriers were far away somewhere else. Nagumo thought that this was not a real threat to Japan. So Nagumo said to his officers, these are just small ships. Cruisers and destroyers. Not carriers. We can kill these ships easily. We will wait for our planes to come back from Midway. Then we will attack these American ships with our torpedoes. We will destroy them completely. But wait. There was a big problem now. 1 hour before this, Nagumo had made a different decision. He had told his men to put bombs on the Japanese planes. Bombs for attacking the island of Midway. Not torpedoes for attacking ships. So the Japanese sailors had spent 1 whole hour taking off the torpedoes from all the planes. They had taken the torpedoes to storage areas. They had brought up bombs from below deck. They had put bombs on all the planes. It was very hard work. It took a long time. The sailors were very tired. But they finished the work. Now Nagumo was telling them to do the opposite thing. Take off the bombs. Put on the torpedoes. Start all over again. So the officers told the sailors the new plan. The sailors were unhappy. But they obeyed. They started taking the bombs off the planes again. They brought the torpedoes back up. They started putting the torpedoes on the planes. It was very hard work again. The sailors were even more tired now. But they worked very fast. They knew that the admiral wanted them to be ready quickly. On the hangar deck below the ship, things were very busy and very confusing. The hangar deck is where the planes are stored. It is where bombs and torpedoes are kept. It is where weapons are prepared. The sailors were taking things off planes. They were putting things on planes. They were moving bombs and torpedoes around. Everything was everywhere. There was no time to put things in the right places. There was no time to organize things properly. Everything was just lying around on the deck. But the sailors kept working. They worked as fast as they could. They thought that maybe they would need to attack American ships soon. At 8:39 in the morning, another message came from the scout plane. This message was different from the other messages. The message said, enemy force accompanied by what appears to be a carrier. One word in this message was very important. The word was, appears. The message did not say, definitely has a carrier. The message did not say, is definitely a carrier. The message said, appears to be a carrier. But that one word changed everything. Nagumo read the message. His whole body went still. He did not move. He did not speak. He just stared at the message. Around him, all the officers became very quiet. No one said anything. No one moved. Everyone was waiting to see what Nagumo would do. Then the captain of the ship, a man named Taro Aoki, came closer to Nagumo. Captain Aoki was worried. Captain Aoki said, Admiral, if the Americans have a carrier, we should attack right now. We should not wait. We should launch an attack immediately with the planes that are ready now. But Nagumo looked at Aoki with sharp eyes. Nagumo's voice was sharp too. Nagumo said, with what? Our planes are still coming back from the Midway attack. They need to land on the deck. Half of our other planes are not ready yet. They are still being armed with weapons. The deck is completely full of planes. We cannot launch an attack right now. The deck is too full. Nagumo pointed out the window of the bridge. You could see the flight deck of the ship. It was absolutely crazy down there. Planes were landing one after another. Sailors were pushing planes to the side to make room for more planes to land. Sailors were running everywhere. There were bombs and torpedoes lying on the ground in many places. Nagumo continued speaking. We have two choices, Captain Aoki. First choice, we launch an attack right now with only some of our planes. Only the planes that are ready right now. But this is not enough planes. We would not have enough strength. We would probably lose the attack. This is not a good choice. Nagumo paused and then said. Second choice, we wait for 1 hour. We bring all our planes back safely. We finish putting weapons on all our planes. We prepare everything correctly and carefully. Then we launch one big attack with all our planes together at the same time. This is the right choice. This is what the manual says to do. This is what my training says to do. We will wait 1 hour. But there was another Japanese admiral. His name was Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi. Yamaguchi was on a different ship. His ship was called the Hiryu. Yamaguchi was very different from Nagumo. Nagumo was careful and slow and cautious. But Yamaguchi was fast and aggressive and bold. Yamaguchi liked to take risks. Yamaguchi liked to attack quickly. Yamaguchi did not like to wait. When Yamaguchi heard about the possible American carrier, he did not think about waiting. He did not think about being careful. He thought about attacking fast. Yamaguchi sent a message to Nagumo using signal lights. The message said, "I think it is advisable to launch an attack force immediately. Even if we only have some planes ready, we should send them now. We should not wait." But Nagumo said no. Nagumo would not listen to Yamaguchi. Nagumo said they would wait. Nagumo said they would do this the right way. The careful way, the safe way. So they waited. Nagumo's decision was to wait. This was the most important decision of the whole battle. This decision would change everything. This decision would change the course of the entire war. But Nagumo did not know this. Nagumo thought he was making the right choice. Nagumo thought he was being smart and careful. Nagumo thought everything would be fine. The Japanese planes from the Midway attack started coming back to the ships. One by one, they landed on the deck. The pilots jumped out. The sailors moved the planes to the side. Everything was busy and rushed and chaotic. The last plane from the Midway attack landed at 8:30 in the morning. The pilot was named Joi Tomonaga. Tomonaga climbed out of his plane. His plane had a hole in the tank from enemy fire. Fuel was leaking from his plane. But Tomonaga was okay. Tomonaga reported to the officers. He said that the second attack on Midway would be necessary. He said that the American buildings were still standing. He said that the American guns were still working. But there was no time to think about this report now. At 10:22 in the morning, something terrible happened. An American plane appeared in the sky above the Japanese ships. Not a torpedo plane. Not a level bomber. A dive bomber. AN/SBD Dauntless. This American plane was coming down from the clouds very high above. The plane was diving down at a steep angle. The plane was getting faster and faster. A lookout on the Akagi saw the plane first. The lookout was terrified. The lookout screamed very loud. "Dive bombers! From the sky! Dive bombers above!" Nagumo turned around and looked up. He saw the dark shape of the plane. The plane was getting bigger and bigger. The plane was getting closer and closer. The plane was getting faster and faster. The plane was coming down like a knife. The ship tried to turn. The captain ordered the ship to turn hard to the side. But the Akagi was a very big ship. It was very heavy. It could not turn fast enough. Behind the first dive bomber, there were more American planes. Many more. 32 more dive bombers came down after the first one. They split into two groups. They were attacking from different directions. They came down screaming. The engines were screaming. The wind was screaming. The Japanese guns started shooting. The anti-aircraft guns tried to hit the American planes. But there were too many planes. There were too many bombs coming down. The first bomb dropped from the first American plane. It missed the ship. It made a huge explosion in the water next to the ship. Water flew up in the air like a big mountain. But the second bomb did not miss. It hit the ship. It went deep, deep, deep inside the ship. It penetrated through the deck. It went down to the hangar deck where all the planes were. Where all the weapons were. The third bomb hit the ship too. It hit near the back of the ship. It also went deep inside. 2 huge bombs. Each bomb weighed 1,000 pounds. 2,000 pounds of explosives inside the ship. Below the deck, in the hangar deck, something absolutely terrible happened. Something that would change everything. The Japanese sailors had been working for 2 hours. They had taken off bombs. They had put on torpedoes. They had taken off torpedoes. They had put on bombs. They had taken off bombs again. They had put on torpedoes again. The hangar deck was full of things. Torpedoes, bombs, missiles, guns, everything was everywhere. The sailors had not had time to put everything back in the safe storage places deep in the ship. Everything was just lying around on the deck where it could be reached quickly. Fuel lines were running across the deck. Aviation fuel and gas was stored in many places. Planes were sitting on the deck fully loaded with fuel. When the two bombs hit, they hit exactly where all these weapons were. They hit exactly where all the fuel was. They hit exactly where all the planes were. The explosion was immediate. The explosion was catastrophic. Everything exploded at the same time. Boom. Point 1 explosion. Boom boom boom. Point 10 more explosions. Boom 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 boom. Point 20 more explosions. The fire started. The fire spread. The fire was everywhere. In just seconds, the whole hangar deck turned into a sea of fire. A sea of burning fire that was burning so hot that you could not even get close to it. The heat was so hot that it melted metal. The heat was so hot that it burned people instantly. The heat was so hot that it could burn through steel. Nagumo felt the ship shake under his feet. It was like an earthquake. The ship shook so hard that people fell down. Objects fell from the walls. Smoke started coming from everywhere. Thick black smoke. The smell was terrible. The smell of burning metal and burning fuel and burning bodies. An officer came running to the bridge. His face was black from the smoke and fire. His clothes were torn and burned. He was screaming. "Admiral! The hangar deck is on fire. The hangar deck is completely on fire. There are big explosions everywhere. We cannot stop the fire. We are losing water pressure. The fire mains are not working. Everything is burning." But Nagumo could not say anything. Nagumo could not think of anything to say. Nagumo just stood there looking down at the deck that was burning below him. Then another officer screamed. "The Kaga! Admiral, the Kaga is hit. The Kaga is on fire." Nagumo turned and looked to the side. 1,000 yards away, another Japanese ship was burning. The Kaga. The Kaga was a big ship. The Kaga was one of the best ships. The Kaga was a sister ship to the Akagi. 4 bombs had hit the Kaga. 4 direct hits. The deck was on fire. The hangar was on fire. In just a few minutes, the whole ship was burning. Then another ship, the Soryu, another Japanese carrier, another good ship. 3 bombs hit the Soryu. The flight deck peeled back like paper. Like it was made of paper instead of metal. Fire shot out from the hangar. Within minutes, the Soryu was burning as badly as the Akagi and the Kaga. 3 ships. 3 big ships. 3 important ships, all on fire, all burning terribly, all in very bad trouble. It all happened in just 6 minutes. 6 minutes. That was all it took to destroy half of Japan's navy. An officer ran to Nagumo and grabbed his arm. The officer was scared. The officer was shouting. "Admiral! We must leave the ship. The ship is lost. The Akagi is lost. You must go to another ship. You must leave now." Nagumo looked at the officer. He looked confused. He did not understand what the officer was saying. He said. "Lost? The ship is lost? How can the ship be lost? We were just preparing for an attack. We were just. Nagumo could not finish the sentence. He did not know what to say. Around him, officers were shouting. They were shouting damage reports. They were shouting that the fire was out of control. They were shouting that the engine rooms were still working but the ship could not fight the fires. They were shouting that the ship could not launch any more planes. The ship was a floating torch. A burning torch in the middle of the ocean. Captain Taro Aoki came to Nagumo. Aoki's clothes were torn. Aoki's face was dirty and burned. Aoki's hair was burned off. But Aoki was still standing. Aoki said, "Admiral, I request permission to stay with this ship. I will go down with the Akagi. But you must leave. You must go to another ship. You must continue directing the battle from another ship. The battle is not finished. You must keep fighting." Nagumo looked at Captain Aoki. Then Nagumo looked at the other ships burning around him. The Akagi was burning. The Kaga was burning. The Soryu was burning. 3 of his 4 carriers, gone, destroyed. In 6 minutes. Nagumo asked one question. "Where is the Hiryu? Is the Hiryu still okay?" An officer said. "Yes, Admiral. The Hiryu was separated from the main formation. The American dive bombers did not find her. The Hiryu is undamaged. The Hiryu is still okay. The Hiryu is the only one left." Nagumo nodded slowly. He understood. Only 1 ship left. Only 1 out of 4. The other 3 were burning and sinking. Nagumo said to his staff. "Signal the Hiryu. Send a message to Rear Admiral Yamaguchi on the Hiryu. Tell him to launch all available aircraft immediately. Tell him to attack the American carriers. Tell him to attack right now. This is an order." At 10:28 in the morning, 6 minutes after the dive bomber struck, Nagumo and his officers left the Akagi. They climbed down a rope from the bridge to a small destroyer ship called the Naka. The destroyer came alongside the burning Akagi. Nagumo crossed over using a hand-over-hand rope. His hands were shaking. His legs were shaking. The Akagi was still floating. The Akagi was still moving through the water under its own power. But the Akagi was burning so fiercely that nobody could save it. Nobody could put out the fire. When Nagumo got to the destroyer Naka, he looked back at the Akagi. He watched the smoke. He watched the fire. He watched the flames coming out of the elevator openings. An officer who was standing next to Nagumo said later that Nagumo did not say one single word. He just stood there and looked at his ship. His face was completely empty. He looked like a dead man. Like something inside him had died. Far, far away, on a big battleship called the Yamato, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto was in a room. This room was the command center. It had maps and radios and many officers. Yamamoto was the leader of all the Japanese ships. Yamamoto had planned this whole operation. Yamamoto had promised that this operation would be successful. At 11 o'clock in the morning, a communications officer came running to Yamamoto. The officer was pale. The officer looked scared. The officer gave Yamamoto a message. Yamamoto read the message. His face did not change. He read it again slowly. He read it 3 times. Then Yamamoto took off his glasses. He put his glasses on the table very carefully. Very slowly, like he was in a dream. An officer asked. "Admiral, what does the message say?" Yamamoto said one word. "Carriers." The officer said. "Yes, sir. 4 carriers. But 3 are heavily damaged and burning. The scout planes say that the Akagi, the Kaga, and the Soryu are all on fire. They are burning very badly. The Hiryu is undamaged. The Hiryu is still okay. But 3 out of 4 carriers are burning." Yamamoto did not move. He did not say anything. He just sat there. Another officer named Rear Admiral Matomagaki was standing next to Yamamoto. Ugaki was watching Yamamoto's face very carefully. Later, Ugaki wrote in his diary what he saw. "I watched the Admiral's face. His face changed. He looked old. Very old. He looked 10 years older. 10 years older in just 10 seconds. It was like watching a man age 10 years in just 10 seconds. Yamamoto had made a big gamble with this whole operation. Yamamoto had bet everything on winning this battle. Yamamoto had bet that Japan could destroy the American carriers. Yamamoto had bet that Japan would be safe after this. But in 6 minutes, the gamble had failed. In 6 minutes, his whole plan had fallen apart. After a very long time, Yamamoto spoke. He asked, "What is Nagumo's situation?" An officer said, "He has transferred his flag to the cruiser Nagara, sir. He is trying to direct the battle from there." Yamamoto said very quietly, "Send a message to all forces. Tell them to keep fighting. Tell them to continue the operation. The Hiryu is still okay. If the Hiryu can attack the American carriers and destroy them, we can still maybe win this battle. We can still maybe achieve our objective." But everyone could see that Yamamoto did not believe his own words. His voice was not strong. His words were not confident. He sounded like a man who knew he had lost. Yamamoto sat down heavily. For the next many hours, he did not say very much. He gave orders when he had to. He made decisions when he had to. But his heart was not in it. Everyone who had worked with him for many years said they had never seen him like this. He was very quiet. Very, very quiet. Like something deep inside him had broken. On the Hiryu, Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi was on the bridge. He was getting ready to launch his attack. He had told his men to prepare all the planes. He had told them to get everything ready. Then an officer came running to him. The officer was breathing hard and crying. The officer said, "Admiral. 3 carriers. 3 of our carriers are burning. The Akagi is burning. The Kaga is burning. The Soryu is burning. They are all on fire. They are all damaged very badly." Yamaguchi stopped moving. He took one quick breath. Like someone had hit him in the stomach with a big fist. For 1 second, he did not say anything. Then his face changed. It became hard and strong and determined. He said one word. "Attack." That was all. Just one word. But it meant everything. Then he said, "Launch everything. Every plane we have. Every dive bomber, every fighter, every plane on this ship. Launch them all now. Send them to attack the American carriers now. Launch them all immediately." At 10:54 in the morning, 18 dive bombers and 6 fighters took off from the Hiryu. They went looking for the American carriers. They found the American carrier Yorktown. They attacked it with bombs. 3 bombs hit the Yorktown. The ship started to burn. Later, Yamaguchi got the message about the Yorktown being hit. Yamaguchi said, "Good. Good work. Now send the torpedo planes. Launch the torpedo attack." At 1:30 in the afternoon, 10 torpedo planes and 6 fighters took off from the Hiryu. They went to attack the Yorktown. 2 torpedoes hit the Yorktown. The ship lost power. The ship went dead in the water. The ship could not move. For a little while, it looked like maybe Yamaguchi was right. Maybe one ship could hurt the Americans. Maybe Japan could still win this battle. Maybe the Hiryu could turn the battle around. But then, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, American planes came to the Hiryu. More dive bombers. More American planes from other American carriers. Yamaguchi looked up and saw them coming. He said one word. "Shikata." In Japanese, this word means, "Damn it," or, "It is finished," or, "This is the end." 4 bombs hit the Hiryu in rapid succession. The flight deck exploded. The hangar deck caught on fire. In just minutes, the Hiryu was burning just like the other 3 ships. Yamaguchi stood on the bridge. He watched the fire spread. He felt the ship shake. He heard the officers shouting about the damage. He said to his officers. All personnel will abandon ship. Everybody get to safety. That is an order. But Yamaguchi would not leave. He said. I am the commander of this carrier group. These were my ships. 3 ships have burned and sunk. Now the 4th ship is burning. I will not leave my ships. I will stay with them. His captain, named Tomokaku, said. I will stay with you, Admiral. I will not leave. Yamaguchi shook his head and said. No, Captain. You must leave. You must tell people what happened here. You must tell the story. But I will stay with the ship. That night, all 4 Japanese carriers were burning or sinking into the ocean. Nagumo was on the cruiser Nagara. He was sitting in a small borrowed cabin. He was alone. He was just sitting. Staring at the wall. Not thinking about anything. Just staring into nothing. Officers came and went. They brought messages. They asked for orders. Nagumo answered them. But his voice sounded like a dead person. Like a robot. Like someone whose mind was somewhere else. One officer heard Nagumo say something very quietly. So quietly that you could almost not hear it. Nagumo was saying very softly. How did they know? How did they know we were coming? How did they know where we would be? How did they know? How? This was the right question. This was the question that would explain everything. The truth was that the Americans had broken the Japanese secret code. The Americans could read Japanese messages. The Americans knew the Japanese plan. The Americans knew where the Japanese ships would be. So the Americans sent their ships to wait for the Japanese. It was an ambush. A perfect ambush. Nagumo had thought he was hunting the Americans. But the Americans were hunting him. Nagumo had thought he had surprise. But he had walked into a trap. That night, Yamamoto on the Yamato received message after message. Bad messages, terrible messages, messages about ships sinking, messages about planes being destroyed, messages about thousands of men dying. More than 3,000 Japanese sailors were dead. More than 250 Japanese planes were destroyed. All 4 big Japanese carriers were gone. At 2:55 in the morning on June 5, Yamamoto gave an order. He said. Cancel the attack on Midway. All ships will return home. All forces will withdraw. We are going back to Japan. The whole operation was cancelled. The whole plan was finished. Ogaki, standing beside Yamamoto, watched the admiral's face as he gave the order. Later, Ogaki wrote in his diary. When the admiral gave that order, he looked like he had just signed his own death warrant. He looked like a completely broken man. Like something inside him had died forever. I had never seen him like this. Never. Yamamoto had promised the Emperor of Japan that this battle would be a great victory. He had promised that all the American carriers would be destroyed. He had promised that Japan would be safe. But instead, Japan had lost. Japan had lost 4 ships. Japan had lost 3,000 men. Japan had lost everything. And the war turned. For 6 months, Japan had been winning everywhere. But at Midway, everything changed. After Midway, Japan started losing. And Japan never won again. In the weeks after Midway, Japanese officers tried to understand what had happened. How could 4 big ships be destroyed in just 6 minutes? How could the Americans appear at just the right place at just the right time? Some officers blamed bad luck. They said the scout plane was late because of catapult problems. They said the rearming took too long. They said the timing was just wrong. Some officers blamed Nagumo. They said he was too careful. They said he should have launched an attack faster. Some officers blamed Yamaguchi for not being with the main formation. But in private, in letters and diaries, Japanese officers understood something deeper. They understood the real truth about what had happened. Commander Mitsuo Fushida was the Japanese pilot who had led the attack on Pearl Harbor. He had been sick during the Midway battle. He was in a hospital bed on the Akagi when the bombs hit. Later, when Fushida was healthy again, he wrote, "We made a terrible mistake. We assumed we were hunting. But we were the prey. We assumed the Americans were reacting to us. But they were waiting for us. We assumed we had surprise. But we were surprised. We assumed we had the advantage. But the Americans had all the advantage. We steamed into an ambush believing we were the hunters when we were actually the hunted. Every assumption we made was wrong. They had broken our codes. They knew our plan. They knew where we would go. This was the big shock. This was the realization that shattered Japanese confidence forever. For 6 months, the Japanese carrier force had operated with complete freedom. They had attacked wherever they wanted. They had attacked whenever they wanted. The Americans could not stop them. But at Midway, everything was different. The Americans knew what the Japanese would do. The Americans knew where the Japanese would go. The Americans were waiting. And in 6 minutes, everything changed. Captain Taro Aoki was the captain of the Akagi. He had stayed on the burning ship as long as possible. Then he had to jump into the ocean. American sailors had rescued him from the water. Many years later, after the war was finished, after Japan had lost, someone asked Aoki, "Captain Aoki, what do you remember most about that day at Midway?" Aoki thought for a long time. He did not answer quickly. He thought about it for a very long time. Then he said, "The silence." "What silence?" the person asked. Aoki said, "After the bombs hit the bridge, after all the explosions, after everything happened. There was a moment of complete silence. Absolute silence. We all just stood there looking at each other. Nobody said anything. We could not say anything. What could we say? We had just watched our entire plan burn. We had just watched our entire hope disappear. We had just watched the war turn against us. There was nothing to say. So we just stood there in silence. This silence, this moment of terrible, complete silence. This was what the Japanese admirals experienced at Midway. Not a big dramatic moment with big speeches. Not a big angry moment with shouting. Just a quiet moment, a terrible, quiet moment. The moment when everything changed. The moment when they understood that they had lost. The moment when they understood that they had been wrong about everything. After Midway, Nagumo returned to Japan. The officers did not officially blame him. But everybody knew. Everybody understood that Nagumo had made mistakes. The mistakes had cost Japan 4 carriers. The officers did not let Nagumo command ships anymore. They gave him jobs on the land. They kept him away from the battle. They kept him away from the ocean. Later, Nagumo was sent to an island called Saipan. American forces attacked the island. Nagumo could see that Japan had lost the war. There was no hope left. There was no way to win. So Nagumo killed himself. He committed suicide. He could not bear the shame. Rear Admiral Yamaguchi went down with the Hiryu when the ship sank. He died with his ship. He died with his men. He was one of the few Japanese admirals to die in combat. He stayed with his ship because he was the commander. He believed it was his duty to stay. Admiral Yamamoto lived for a while longer. But he was a changed man. Officers who had known him for many years said they had never seen him like this. Something inside him had broken at Midway. Something important had died. 2 years later, in April 1943, American fighters found Yamamoto's plane in the sky. The American fighters had received messages telling them where Yamamoto would be flying. American intelligence had decoded Japanese messages and knew Yamamoto's schedule. The American fighters shot down Yamamoto's plane. Yamamoto died in the crash. So Yamamoto, the man who had planned Pearl Harbor, the man who had started the whole war, died in the same way that his sailors had died. He died in a plane that was shot down. He died in combat. The Battle of Midway was very important in history. It was important because it changed everything. Before Midway, Japan was winning. Japan was strong. Japan looked like they could not lose. After Midway, Japan started losing. Japan was weak. Japan was on the defensive. Japan was fighting a war they could not win. The war continued for 3 more years after Midway. But Japan never came back from that day. Japan never recovered from losing 4 carriers and 3,000 men. Midway was the turning point of the war in the Pacific. After Midway, America started winning. America's power grew stronger. Japan's power grew weaker. What the Japanese admirals said when they realized Midway was an ambush was not very dramatic. They did not make big speeches. They did not shout loud words. Nagumo said, "How did they know?" Yamaguchi said, "Shikata." Damn. Yamamoto said nothing. He just aged 10 years in 10 seconds. He just looked like a broken man. And Captain Aoki remembered, the silence. Because sometimes, the most important moments are the quiet ones. The moments when a man understands that he has lost. That he was wrong. That everything he believed has fallen apart. This story tells you exactly what the Japanese admirals said when they realized Midway was an ambush. It tells you the confusion. It tells you the shock. It tells you the terrible realization that changed the whole war. The Japanese had thought they were winning. They had thought they had the advantage. They had thought they would destroy the American carriers. But in 6 minutes, everything changed. And all they could say was silence.